I spent 5 years caring for my niece every single weekend, cooking, cleaning, paying for her dance lessons. Also, my sister could have her life back. I never asked for a single dollar. But the one time I said no, everything exploded. She sued me. Claimed I traumatized her daughter. Tried to ruin my life. What she didn't know was, I had receipts. Years of them. And when the truth finally came out in court, everything she built came crashing down. What happens when the person you love most weaponizes a child against you? Watch until the end. You won't believe how far she went or what I had to do to protect my niece. I never planned to become a second mother. It just kind of happened. When my older sister Vanessa had Chloe, I was 27 and living alone. I loved being an aunt, I really did. At first, it was just the occasional Saturday afternoon so Vanessa could run errands or nap. But over time, it turned into every weekend. Then overnight stays. Then full weekends. She'd say things like, "You don't understand what it's like being a single mom," or "You don't have kids, you have time." I didn't argue. I adored Chloe. She was this bright, hilarious little girl who called me Auntie Mama by the time she was 3. Vanessa never paid me. Not once. I never asked. I bought Chloe her favorite snacks, signed her up for dance when Vanessa couldn't afford it, even kept a booster seat in my car and a drawer full of pajamas at my apartment. We made pancakes every Sunday morning. I went to parent-teacher nights when Vanessa was too tired. I told myself I was just helping. That this was family. That Vanessa was overwhelmed. But then came that weekend. It was a Friday afternoon and I had dinner plans with a guy I'd just started seeing. Nothing serious, but still, a rare treat. Vanessa texted me out of the blue. "Can you take Chloe tonight? I have something." I hesitated. I'd already seen Chloe the weekend before, and I'd made these plans a week ago. So I gently replied, "I wish I could, but I have plans tonight. Want to do tomorrow instead?" I stared at the typing bubble for a while before the message finally came in. "Wow. Selfish much? After everything I've done for you? You know Chloe looks forward to this all week. You're bailing on a 6-year-old. I was stunned. My chest physically hurt reading it. I tried calling, no answer. I texted again. Nothing. Just silence. 2 weeks went by. No contact. No explanation. Just cold radio silence from the woman I'd basically co-parented with for half a decade. Then came the knock at my door. It was a courier. He handed me a thick envelope and left without a word. Inside was a formal letter from Vanessa's lawyer. She was suing me. Not for money I owed, or property damage. No. She was suing me for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I read the words over and over, thinking it had to be some kind of prank. In the letter, Vanessa claimed I had established a maternal role in Chloe's life, then abruptly abandoned her, causing severe psychological harm. She wanted $10,000 in damages. Attached was a signed affidavit, shaky, barely legible, claiming Chloe had become withdrawn, anxious, even stopped eating after I abandoned her. My hands were shaking. I dropped the papers on the counter and sat on the floor. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. And I realized, for the first time, just how badly Vanessa had been taking advantage of me all along. For days, I walked around like a ghost. I barely slept. I'd wake up with Vanessa's words running on a loop in my head, abandoned her. Psychological harm. $10,000. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How do you go from "thank God for you" to a lawsuit? Chloe had been at my apartment practically every weekend for 5 years. I'd changed her diapers, sat up with her through stomach bugs, taught her how to braid her hair. I had photos of us decorating cupcakes, dancing in the living room, her falling asleep on my chest during movie nights. And now I was being accused of damaging her. Part of me wanted to call Vanessa and beg her to drop it. To remind her of everything I'd done. To ask, "Why are you doing this to me?" But deep down, I knew why. Because the one time I said no, I stopped being useful. I brought the envelope to a friend of mine who worked in HR. She skimmed the papers and raised an eyebrow. "She's trying to scare you. This is ridiculous." It didn't feel ridiculous. It felt like betrayal in its sharpest, coldest form. But I didn't just sit with it. I called a lawyer. His name was Mark. First thing he asked, "Do you have any proof of your involvement in the child's life?" I almost laughed. "I have 5 years' worth." I pulled everything. Every text message from Vanessa that said things like, "I don't know what I'd do without you," or "You're more of a mom to her than I am sometimes." I opened my Venmo app, payments I'd made for Chloe's ballet shoes, school lunches, even a birthday party cake when Vanessa couldn't afford it. Mark's eyebrows rose as I laid it all out. Calendars showing overnight stays. Photos from zoo trips, library programs, and Sunday pancakes. Screenshots of Vanessa saying, "You're a lifesaver. Chloe lights up around you." Then Mark asked, "Has she ever paid you anything?" "Not a penny." His tone shifted. "You might have grounds for a counterclaim." I blinked. "What?" "She's essentially accusing you of taking on a maternal role and then harming the child by stepping back. That implies you provided childcare, a service, and she's acknowledging its emotional value. We can flip that." So we filed a counter lawsuit for false claims, defamation, and unpaid caregiving labor. We totaled it up, 48 months of unpaid weekend childcare, including overnight care, school pickups, and educational expenses I'd covered myself. $26,000. Mark filed it within a week. Vanessa didn't respond directly, but I got an email from her the next day. Just 4 words. "You're dead to me." I sat in my car reading it, and for the first time in this whole nightmare, I didn't cry. Because this wasn't about love. It never had been. It was about control. And I'd finally taken some of mine back. The more we dug, the uglier it got. Mark was thorough. He had his team do a background check on Vanessa's employment and social activity. That's when things really started to unravel. One of his assistants found Vanessa's blog. I'd never even known it existed. It was called Motherhood in Motion, with thousands of followers and slick, polished posts about gentle parenting, toddler enrichment, and solo mom strength. And right there, in post after post, were my photos. Pictures of Chloe finger painting in my kitchen, reading books in my lap, posing with me at the Children's Museum, all cropped to hide me. Captions like "Love investing in weekends with my daughter. Making memories that last." She even had a full post about hosting Chloe's 5th birthday party. I was the one who paid for the bouncy house, the cake, the party favors. I even handmade the invitations. Vanessa had shown up 2 hours late. But now here she was, claiming she planned the whole thing and sponsored by a family brand, no less. Mark's voice was low when he said, "We'll be including this in our counterclaim." I felt sick. Like the past 5 years had been rewritten by someone else. But it got worse. Vanessa had apparently been applying for government assistance programs, stating that she was paying out of pocket for weekend childcare. She listed me as the provider on one of the online forms. Which meant, on paper, she'd been telling the government she was paying me while actually giving me nothing and suing me for emotional damages. It was fraud. Blatant. Documented. Mark pulled transcripts and screenshots from those applications. When he called the child welfare office to flag it, their response was dead serious. "Can you send us everything you have?" The tone of the case shifted. It wasn't just a petty sibling fight anymore, it was criminal deception. But through all of this, I kept thinking about Chloe. I hadn't seen her in almost a month. No weekend sleepovers. No pancake Sundays. No FaceTimes. I worried constantly, was she okay? Did she understand what was happening? Did she think I just walked away? One afternoon, I passed by the dance studio I'd enrolled her in, the one I paid for. I peeked through the glass. She wasn't there. I went home and cried for the first time in weeks. Because this wasn't about money or lawsuits or pride anymore. It was about a little girl who was being used as leverage. A pawn. A story prop. And I knew then that no matter how the legal mess ended, I wasn't backing down. Not until the truth was out. Not until Chloe knew someone was still fighting for her. The pretrial mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I walked into that room with Mark beside me and a folder full of evidence clutched in my hand. My palms were sweating, but I kept telling myself, you didn't lie. You didn't steal. You showed up. Vanessa was already seated when we arrived, crisp blazer, full makeup, no eye contact. Her lawyer looked equally smug. For a second, I had this surreal moment where I thought, how did we get here? We were sisters. The mediator began by asking if we were willing to settle quietly. Vanessa's lawyer said they'd consider it if I dropped the counterclaim and paid a portion of her emotional distress damages. I think I laughed. Not loudly. Just one of those stunned, breathless chuckles you make when someone slaps you with nonsense. Mark slid the manila folder across the table. Before we discuss that, he said, you'll want to look through this. Inside was everything. Screenshots of texts from Vanessa thanking me for saving her sanity. Side-by-side images of her blog posts using my photos. Government aid applications listing my name, falsely claiming I was a paid childcare provider. Venmo receipts tied to Chloe's expenses, all from my end. The mood changed fast. Vanessa's lawyer turned stiff. Vanessa's eyes darted like she wanted to bolt. She looked at me for the first time since we sat down, and I swear, she looked afraid. That's when Mark leaned in and said quietly, we're also in contact with the Child Welfare Office. They're reviewing your client's assistance filings. Just so everyone's aware. The silence after that was heavy. Vanessa stood up. Her voice cracked. You're trying to ruin me. I didn't flinch. I just want you to stop lying. The mediator ended the session early. No agreement. Straight to court. Over the next month, things escalated. Vanessa's blog got flagged by a parenting watchdog site for suspicious sponsorship claims. She took down half her posts overnight. Then I got a call from Chloe's school counselor. She said Chloe had been withdrawn lately. Quiet. Not herself. She finally told her teacher, I think Aunt Lily is mad at me. I hung up and sobbed. Because I knew what Vanessa had done. She hadn't just lied to the courts, she'd lied to her own daughter. Said I didn't want to see her anymore. That I moved on. That it was my fault. That night, I sent one email. To Mark. I told him, we go all the way. No settling. No deals. She crossed too many lines. This wasn't revenge. It was protection. And it wasn't just for me anymore. It was for the little girl who still thought I left without saying goodbye. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand chandeliers or sweeping architecture, just beige walls, hard benches, and the stale smell of old carpet. But to me, it felt like the arena where everything was going to change. Vanessa sat across the aisle, arms folded, face blank. She didn't even glance at me. The judge was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and zero patience. From the start, she made it clear, facts only. No drama. Vanessa's lawyer led with their claim, I had established a maternal bond, then severed it without warning, causing psychological damage to a minor. They read a watered-down version of the affidavit, the same shaky, vague language about Chloe becoming anxious, withdrawn, emotionally harmed. They didn't call any witnesses. No therapist. No teacher. Just a piece of paper. Then it was our turn. Mark stood and said, we intend to prove that not only is this claim unfounded, it is part of a long-standing pattern of exploitation, deception, and financial abuse. He called me to the stand first. I told everything. Calmly. Clearly. 5 years of weekends. Dance lessons I paid for. Meals I cooked. Bedtime stories. Report cards I signed because Vanessa was too busy. Mark showed the text messages, Vanessa thanking me, praising me, leaning on me. Then came the blog. Photos of Chloe in my home. Side-by-side comparisons. Her monetizing content using my caregiving, pretending it was her own. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. Then came the kicker. Mark handed over copies of government assistance forms. Highlighted lines where Vanessa claimed to pay me $150 a week. Total lie. He showed my bank statements. No deposits. No paper trail. That's when the room really shifted. Vanessa squirmed in her seat. Her lawyer whispered something urgently, but she shook her head. The judge paused, looked over the documents again, then addressed Vanessa directly. Ms. Jennings, are you aware that submitting false information on government applications constitutes fraud? Vanessa went pale. I didn't mean. The judge cut her off. I'm not asking for interpretation. I'm asking if you were aware. She stammered, then went silent. Mark rested our case with a final statement: my client did not abandon a child. She was systematically used for unpaid labor, emotionally manipulated, and publicly accused of causing harm when in fact, she was the one providing stability. It was quiet for a long moment. Then the judge spoke. She dismissed Vanessa's lawsuit immediately. Then she turned to our counterclaim. Based on the documentation presented, the court finds in favor of Ms. Harper in the amount of $26,000 in restitution for unpaid childcare, defamation, and related emotional damages. Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped. But the judge wasn't done. She added, further, due to concerns raised regarding the child's well-being and discrepancies in the parenting blog and government filings, I am ordering a family evaluation and counseling requirement if Ms. Jennings wishes to retain full parental custody without oversight. It was everything I hoped for and more. But walking out of that courtroom, I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt like I'd survived something I never should have had to face at all. After the verdict, everything moved fast, but the fallout was ugly. Vanessa's face was gray as we left the courthouse, her lawyer trailing behind her. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush after her, didn't try to patch things up. I just walked out with Mark and called a cab home, hands shaking with relief and something that felt a lot like grief. Within a week, word started to spread through our family. Vanessa tried to get ahead of the story, calling relatives, posting vague rants about betrayal and family backstabbers online. But the documents spoke louder than gossip. I emailed a few of the key receipts and court orders to my parents, who'd always believed Vanessa's side. When my aunt called to say, "I'm so sorry. We had no idea," I nearly cried. That wasn't the worst of it for Vanessa. The parenting blog she'd built started to unravel. The watchdog site published a piece outlining her suspicious content and plagiarized photos, and brands began to quietly distance themselves. By the end of the month, she'd lost every sponsorship. A few followers even posted side-by-side comparisons of her blog photos with those on my social media, and people noticed the truth. Chloe's school got involved after the family evaluator made a home visit. Her teacher emailed me about the signs they'd seen Chloe coming to school with unwashed hair, empty lunchboxes, tired eyes. Child Services began a formal review. I kept my head down. I went to work, I went to therapy, and I waited for updates from Mark and the court. It wasn't about revenge. It was about Chloe. I missed her so much it physically hurt. The guilt of not being there every weekend gnawed at me. But I told myself I'd done what I could. I'd proven the truth. One afternoon, Mark called me. "The court is considering a part-time custody arrangement for you, Lily. Child Services is recommending it. They think it would be in Chloe's best interest to have regular time with you." I broke down in tears of relief, disbelief, maybe even hope. All the years I'd spent giving, quietly supporting, never asking for anything in return. They'd seen it. Someone finally saw what I'd done for Chloe, and for once, it counted. Vanessa called that night for the first time since the lawsuit. Her voice was tired, flat. "You got what you wanted. I hope you're happy." I didn't argue with her. I just said, I want what's best for Chloe. Always did. She hung up. I sat in the dark, thinking about everything that had changed. My family was fractured, maybe for good. Vanessa's image was in ruins. But for the first time, Chloe might actually be safe. And I knew I'd fight for her, no matter what it cost me. The first time Chloe came back for a weekend, she ran straight into my arms like nothing had ever changed. She clung to me, breathing fast and shaky, and whispered, "I missed you so much." I knelt down and promised her, "I'm not going anywhere." We made pancakes the next morning, just like always. But everything felt different. Chloe was quieter at first, watching me with worried eyes, asking if her mom was mad at me. I told her the truth, that grown-ups sometimes have to work out big problems, but none of it was her fault, and she was loved. It felt strange to tiptoe around the mess, but I refused to let her carry the blame Vanessa tried to hand her. Week by week, things slowly settled. I took Chloe to her dance class again. We built pillow forts, read bedtime stories, and I showed her the box of photos I'd saved to proof that our happy memories were real. Sometimes, she'd ask if her mom was okay. I told her the truth without bitterness. "She's figuring things out. But you're safe with me." Vanessa was ordered to attend counseling and co-parenting classes if she wanted to keep unsupervised custody. For a while, she resisted, insisting she'd been wronged. But eventually, even she had to admit Chloe needed more stability than she could offer alone. The rest of the family tried to move forward. Some relatives reached out, apologizing for taking sides. Others stayed distant, unable to let go of their version of the story. I let it go. I was tired of fighting for people who didn't want to see the truth. Chloe flourished with routine, love, and space to just be a kid. Her teachers saw her come alive again. She laughed more, played harder, and her nightmares faded. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me during breakfast, as if to make sure I was really there. Every time, I smiled and told her, "I'm here. I promise." The money I was awarded never felt like a victory. I used it to set up a college fund for Chloe, to pay for therapy, and to rebuild my own sense of self. I started volunteering at her school, helping other families avoid the traps I'd fallen into out of loyalty and fear. Looking back, I still grieve what I lost: my sister, my innocence, my old definition of family. But I gained something more powerful: the strength to stand up, to draw boundaries, and to fight for the child who needed me most. Family isn't always who shares your blood. Sometimes, it's the person who stays when things get hard, who shows up even when it means going to war. That's the real lesson I learned. And I'll never forget it.